Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. We are going to look at test containers here in 2025. How do we set that up? Is it difficult? No, it is not difficult. So first of all, this is actually my Java 25 demo project that I'm using right here. I've used the Spring initializers to start this up. So watch the Java 25 video if you haven't seen it yet, and if you want to see how I created this project right here. What I've added to this demo right here is the test containers dependency right here. It is really easy. This solves the problem when we have external dependencies like a Redis database, or if we need a Google Cloud Firestore database or something like that, and we don't want to store, and we don't want to use the cloud directly. Maybe we don't have a network access when we run the pipeline. Then we want to use test containers instead. Of course, there are test containers for any. You can use test containers for anything that is Docker containerized with Docker, for instance. That means that you can use PostgreSQL, MySQL, whatever. Only the imagination sets the limits. That means it is almost limitless. Okay, so you need to add this dependency right here. Test containers, and you also need to add this dependency right here. This is because this is a part of the JUnit 5 framework that we actually have an add-on, which is the test containers right here. So we have the at the test containers group right here. Then we have an artifact named JUnit Jupiter. Jupiter is the fifth planet from the sun. That's why it is JUnit 5 right here. And the scope is only test. We're only using it for testing. We don't want this code to go into production. Another thing I've added is Redis. I really like Redis. It's just so easy to use. Whenever you need to connect to a Redis database, then you use Redis. It's incredibly easy. Of course, if you use the kind of built-in Redis implementation with Spring Boot, I think it's not as transparent, and it's a little slightly more complex to set up. This is very easy. If you only have to use a client part, then use Redis if you haven't tried it yet. It's really transparent, and it's very readable, the code that you create from this. Okay, so the situation is that I have a Redis service right here. It's actually this is my Redis service. I inject a Redis client right here that I've configured in a configuration class. I'll show you that in just a minute. I have two methods on this Redis service. I can set a key value, and I can get the value back from the key right here. And I'm returning an optional just because we should always avoid null point exceptions. Of course, we don't like those. So that means that when we can, then we use default values, and when we don't have any default values, then we use optionals, of course, instead. So then we can check whether it's empty or whether it has a value. So that is the service right here. And we use lombok also. So you can see right here we have a required args constructor. That means that this will automatically be injected by the constructor that is automatically created by lombok right here, by this annotation right here, required args constructor. That means that behind the scenes, constructor matching all the private final fields will automatically be created, and then we get an instance of this Redis client right here. The Redis client has been configured right here in my Redis configuration right here. Here I am creating a bean, and I just connect to localhost and then a fixed port right here. Of course, in the real scenario, you would have a configuration properties class up here, where you would point to the properties that matches your current profile or your current environment or your current situation. So that could be, you have one situation that could be when you run in a pipeline. Another situation is when it's deployed in development or in stage or in production. So that those were three profiles and three situations. And the fourth one is then when you run locally. So that's 5 all in all, if you also count the pipeline run. But this is what we set up right here. We don't need anything else. We don't need any extra parameters and arguments in this situation right here. But if you have special needs to set up some weird stuff like timeouts and stuff like that, then you can also configure that right there. Okay, so then we go to the test, Mike. Yes, let us go to the test. My Spring test is right here. So I've created. Okay, so first of all, we need to set up some boilerplate code to use test containers. Inside the tests, we need to say that we want to use the test container. That means that, and we need to have Docker engines, the Docker desktop started. I've already started it up, and you can actually set Docker desktop up so you start it up automatically when you start up your computer. But I've disabled that feature because I want the resource. It's not always that I'm playing with Docker, that I don't want to waste resources on Docker desktop. But feel free to do that, of course. And then I am importing some test container configuration that I need for this specific test right here. So that means that when you have different tests that have which has different needs, then you can just import the whatever they need right here. And of course, this is a configuration that I've created myself. It's right here. So you just annotate this with test configuration, proxy bean methods false. And most of this you could also read this in the documentation, but there is a little trick that you cannot read in the documentation, which is not annoying, but you just need to know that is how it works. So you can also, here we import test containers right here, and inside the configuration we are adding extra configuration on our Redis container instance, which we get injected right here. So that we are setting a port binding to a fixed port, and that is what the documentation does not mention this part right here, because the official way to use test containers is to have a random port assigned to the port that you need to connect to, and then you could fetch that random port, and then you can connect to that random port afterwards by configuring the client with that port that it extracts. But I actually like to have this fixed port right here, so I have chosen that right here. And I also know that in my pipeline environment, there's nothing else that runs on port 63799. And then my scenario will actually be more like a deployed scenario than if I had to go find it's not that difficult, it's just an annotation. Then I could take the port, and then we could have used that also. Maybe I'll show you how to do that in another video after I prepared that part in this video right here. In this video, I want to show this trick where you can create a new configuration right here in the test source folder. And here I would say that I want to bind port 6379 on my own machine to the container 6379 right here. Okay, so far so good. In the official documentation, you can see that we will create an interface named whatever. I just named the test container definition because that's exactly what it is, but you can name it whatever you want to. And then you just need to annotate all of the containers that you need with add container. And then you just define all of your containers. So it means that if I also needed a PostgreSQL for my test to run green, then I will also have a container with Postgres container. I'm just using the generic container right here. There are actually specific containers to a specific need. That means that if you want to connect to Firestore in Google, for instance, then there's actually a container that you can use for that purpose. But you can always use generic container, and then you can pass in a Docker name right here, an image name, and then the official documentation. If you want to go grab the port, then you would in the end right here. Then you would say with exposed ports, and then you would put in your port right here. What that does is that would actually map the port to a random port locally, random available port locally, and then you would have to find the port in your test, and then just tell your service or whatever it is that needs to have access to Redis that this is the port that it has to connect to. It is totally doable, and I might show you that in another video, but it's not for this demo right here. Okay, so now we have the test containers definition, which is an interface with an annotation, with container annotation, and we also have a configuration that actually fudges. Oh, no, it does not fudge, but it gives extra configuration to the port bindings. Unfortunately, we could not set this. It's not possible to set that right here. We can only expose the ports. We cannot set the port bindings right here. Of course, that would have been quite useful and convenient if if that would be if that was possible, but it is unfortunately not possible to set that right here. So that means that we have to have this extra class right here where we are applying extra configuration. Okay, so let's go back to the test. So here we have the test, and it is a Spring Boot test. We are using assert J for the assertions. We are using JUnit 5 to run the tests themselves. And then we have the test containers configuration also added right here. Actually, if you press Alt 8 on your keyboard, then you can see, then you actually have something called services and then Docker. There we can actually see that the Redis service will actually spin up. So first of all, I'm injecting my service right here, autowired, and then my service. Then I say set key value mic, and then we can say tests 1, 2, 3, 4, just so you can see this is not a PowerPoint show. And then we will we will print it out with system out print line right here, and then we will also assert that the value that we get back, it's an optional, so we can actually first check that it's not empty. Is not empty right here. Assert J is cool. If you haven't tried it, then watch my video about assert J. Of course, now it will actually not be now it should be green again. So let's press play, run, little green arrow, and if you want to rerun, then just press Shift F10, then you rerun whatever you ran last. So here we can actually see it, boom, 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 optional, test 1, 2, 3, 4, that's what we got back. And of course, if we try to get some other value, something like this, then of course we will get a null returned instead. Or an empty optional. We'll get an empty optional back. So we will say null per exception. Yeah, that's because we call get. So instead of this, then we will actually say that we will actually assert that it is empty. And let us see what happens now. It failed with a null pointer exception. Get value. Get value. Okay. Optional off. Okay. So if it is empty, okay. So this value right here, this string here, if s is null, then return empty, or else then return optional off, and then the string that we return right here. Was that enough to make it happy? Let's see. Boom, boom, boom. And optional, and I think that that's actually another one, is of nullable. Yes, of nullable. Sorry about this. Of course, this is not good, but so we say optional of nullable instead of off. I do this mistake a lot. I don't know why I do this like every 3 months. Then I don't understand why my optional gives me a null point exception. And that is simply because when you create an optional and the content in here can be null, then you need to say of nullable instead of off. But now it's happy. So now it's happy because it's empty right here. It is null, so it is this value right here. It's empty because we have not set this key right here. Yeah, why shouldn't we just see the dog container spin up? Yes. Easy now. Press Shift F10, then we run again. And let us try again. It went a little bit fast. Shift F10. Here we can see containers. Look what happens right here. Look, we get all of these containers, and we have another container. That is because, yes, that's another cool thing. If you have two tests running, then you. So this is the test containers. It will create. Yeah. So if you have more than one test running, then you just get more than one container. Let's try again, and you will get one container for the test containers set up, and then you will get one. You will get one specific Redis container on top of this. So you will actually get two. This is just one. So we will just run again. And I need to be faster. So here we have two. Okay. You probably saw it there, but it was there just as soon as the test is done, then the test container is torn down afterwards again, and it's also deleted. per default. That is the default approach. So it's very useful because we want to, when we are creating our test, we want to test as close as possible to the real deployed scenario as we can. So we always want to deploy as close to production as possible. We want to test. We want to test as close to production as possible, and we do that with actually using the real software that we depend on. This code right here, it uses Java 25. It's in an early access right now, and that's because I used it for an early access Java 25 demo early on. And I'm going to push this code to GitHub, so you can just find it there on my account as usual. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for all of your comments also. Have a great evening, and I hope to see you again very soon. Bye-bye.